Hey guys, so today I decided to put together a pretty elaborate crash course on moose. I'm basically just going to go over the things that I've learned, experienced, studying moose and photographing them for the last 2 or so years. If you're maybe like an aspiring wildlife photographer looking for more subjects to shoot, or you live in an area that are known to have moose but you're just growing frustrated because you haven't seen any, then stick around because this video is for you. So moose are the largest members of the deer family. They can weigh anywhere from 800 to 1,500 pounds. Depending on where you live in the US, adult moose can be 6 feet tall, measured by their shoulder. I'm talking more specifically about New England moose. And they can live anywhere from 10 to 12 years out in the wild, and then about 15 to 25 years in captivity. They're also very, very nearsighted. They can't see or focus on anything that's like stationary from anywhere like further away than 10 to 12 feet. So they're not very good at seeing you. However, their hearing is absolutely exceptional. They're also known as crepuscular animals, which means that they're most active during dawn and dusk hours. And out of the lower 48 states of the US, the best, most populated state for moose is Maine. And I'm gonna try to organize this video based on like the seasons and their yearly cycle, so you get a better idea if there's a specific season that you're looking to see them. So I'm just gonna keep it organized like that, and then I'll throw in more like other facts and important info along the way. So I'm gonna start with spring because that's their most visible, active time of year, I would say. So around like early April, moose are gonna be more drawn to roadsides because after the winter time, there's been like salt and stuff that's accumulated, and it has like slid down into those like little marshy, boggy areas that you might see sometimes up north on the roadside. And I mean, moose are pretty solitary animals. You'll almost never see them in groups. Genders don't really ever hang out either, unless it's the rut. But around maybe early spring is sometimes when you will see them grouped together. It's because salt has a lot of minerals that they miss out on during the winter. So that's just something that they do to catch up on their nutrients after a long, harsh winter. And bulls are usually going to be found more in higher elevation throughout the year until about the rut season when they come down. That's just because moose get heat stressed really easily, and bulls, being bigger than cows, are going to become more easily overheated. So they just want to, like, number one, be super like solitary, but also go and get as much cool shade as possible. And bulls don't have their antlers all throughout the year. They will usually shed them sometime in like January, and they won't start regrowing them until early April. And a mature moose can grow as much as an inch per day for 5 months straight. So you can imagine how big those antlers get. Believe it or not, their antlers are the fastest growing bone tissue in the world. So then let's go into May. That's usually around the time that calves are born. Before the winter tick and global warming and all of that started to screw up the moose population, cows were known to give birth to more twins. They still do, but you're not really going to see them as much. It's usually just one nowadays, or nothing at all. And calves will stay with their mother for about a year, and they will reach mating maturity around 16 to 28 months. And as far as habitat, early spring going into summer, you're usually going to see them around more wetland areas. So very shallow bogs, ponds, stuff like that. Preferably where you might see beaver dams, because that will just like keep the water more stationary, and it creates an environment where more vegetation can grow. So moose usually will prefer like water lilies. Rag and duckweed are some of their favorite treats to snack on. And I mean, I'm not a biologist by all means, disclaimer. These are just stuff that I've observed throughout the years. Moose have nostrils that kind of like what seals have, like that close up and seal, because they're actually excellent swimmers. they can dive down up to 20 feet deep underwater and feed for about 30 to 60 seconds at a time. They can even swim as fast as 6 miles an hour, which honestly is even faster than I can run. I think so. That's pretty crazy. And while they usually go to these bodies of water to feed, they also go because they get heat stress very easily, so it just gives them a chance to cool down when they're not in the woods all day. Like I said, moose are crepuscular, so they're the most active during dawn and dusk, and that's also just because it's cooler hours of the day. And they also don't sleep like humans. They won't sleep continually for hours at a time. They'll actually just do like short naps throughout the day, and then midday you usually won't see them because they'll bed down like deep in the woods just to stay away from insects and the sun. But around between Mother's Day and Father's Day is when blackfly season is especially at its peak in the northern US, especially like around Maine, creeping into Canada. So sometimes even when it's too hot, you might still see them out in the bogs, even midday too, just to get away from bugs and try to wash that off themselves. So as you might have guessed by already, moose are herbivores. They can eat up to even 70 pounds of vegetation per day, which is why they have 4 stomachs to digest all of that. They don't have any front teeth. I believe they only have back like chewing teeth. So their front like snout is very like floofy and mushy. But then after that, once you reach like mid-July into mid-August, it just becomes too hot and moose are not going to be as active out and about, so they're a lot harder to spot. So your best bet is usually moose tours, just getting to know the area. Sometimes I've done that to familiarize myself with a spot and then go back later at another time. Or, you know, Google Earth and Google Maps is going to be your best friend. I know I've spent so many countless hours researching locations and just trying to look for small bodies of water, maybe areas that I would assume has some beaver dams and thick tree cover around it, because I'd say that's usually your best bet when it comes to finding them. And then so let's transition to the rut season if you're looking to find some more bull moose, since they are so difficult to find, since they just hide all year up until that point. Moose are usually wherever they're born, they will stay resident to that area by a couple miles, so they don't really ever leave until the rut season. They'll start to roam around the territory a bit more in search for mates. And by now, bulls will start to shed like the velvet that's been supplying blood to their bones and their antlers. So they'll start like raking it off in trees and such, and that's all actually some of the things that you'll want to watch out for when looking and trying to like find signs of bull moose nearby. When you go into the woods, you want to look for like branches that have been snapped, rubbings on trees, maybe some velvet shavings hanging over branches. And when I say in the woods, I mean more pertaining to logging territory especially, so low cut, fresh vegetation, young forest lands, so trees that have been cut and they're growing back maybe about 3 years old, so they're at like a lower level for moose to get to, because as the season starts to cool, you know, aquatic vegetation is going to die out, so they make their way into the woods. And logging roads are also great during the rut because they kind of create passageways for travel when they're on the lookout. And then I think like closer to forest edges by the water, I'd say, just because the soil is more soft, but still by the logging roads, this is where bull moose will usually dig their rut pit, which if you don't know already, is a pit that they pee in and then they roll themselves around in that pheromone musk to attract mates, aside from just also doing like their calls, listening for cows calling them. And even during the rut season, I mean, you might still see them at bogs because you'll still get very hot days, especially early in the rut. The rut usually is, I mean, I'd say this is pretty universal, mid-September to mid-October. you will still see them out and about because cows' behavior usually isn't affected too much by the rut. They're usually tending to their young, making sure they get enough nutrients for the winter for when they do get pregnant. So they just continue eating as per usual. But then this is around the time of year that bull actually can stop eating for a couple of days, even up to a week, I think, because they are so fixated on finding a mate. And so since moose are very heat sensitive, in general, I'd say any time of year, their favorite ideal weather conditions is anything from, I'd say, 65 degrees and under. Anything 70 degrees and above, they're going to get heat stressed and not want to come out. You'll want overcast days, so block as much sun out as possible. Maybe a slight breeze to keep the bugs at bay, and maybe a little bit of rain even would be quite ideal. The more peaceful, the better. You don't want too much wind and make the same mistake I made last year, which was that I went out during the rut and it was so unbelievably windy. It was also during one of New England's biggest droughts. This was in 2025. And like there was just no wildlife at all because the windier it is, the more vulnerable they feel. They can't hear any predators or even each other. If you're doing mating calls and you have the wind blowing the opposite direction, they're not going to be able to hear each other. So yeah, you just want calm conditions. Also, quick pro tip, if you're trying to distinguish a cow from a bull, so bulls are obviously going to be bigger. They're also the only ones to have antlers. They might not really have antlers if you're looking at them like early in the year. They'll have like little nubs at best. They'll also have like long ropey bells, which cows also have, but males are just going to have bigger ones. And then cows will have a lighter patch of fur on their hind legs, as opposed to bulls will have a darker fur patch. So that's just an easy way to distinguish them. If you're looking at juveniles, it's going to be a little bit more tricky. But yeah, so back to the rut. As they've made their way away from wetlands and have migrated more towards logging roads and foresty areas, they're going to be usually drawn to willow, birch, aspen, balsam, and red maple. That's usually what they like the most. If you're like me and you kind of suck at identifying plants, my best advice is just look for the most vibrant colored trees during foliage season because those are usually the most vibrantly turning ones. And like I said, moose are the most active early spring. They kind of stop midsummer and then they become very active but mostly unpredictable during the rut. Just because bulls are only concentrating on mating. This is also the time that they will get very angsty, aggressive, stressed, anxious. So you want to be very careful when approaching wildlife in general. They are also known to run as fast as 35 miles an hour. So my best advice for being safe from them, since they're actually more dangerous than black bears in New England, believe it or not, that actually shocks a lot of people. They don't want anything to do with you, really. It's just if you get in their space, they're going to feel threatened and they might want to come at you. So worst case scenario, I carry bear spray with me, but that's my last resort. I really wouldn't want to use that, especially if it's windy like today. You usually would want to view them either from the safety of your vehicle, which is usually actually what I just end up doing since you see them on the roadside so frequently. But if it's the rut and it's a bit harder to see them from your vehicle, you're going to want to go into the woods and those logging areas. So your best bet would be to hide behind a large, thick tree or a bush. And that's because moose have a very huge blind spot in the middle of their face since their eyes are on their sides. And they're also on four legs, so it's just difficult for them to chase you and run around the tree to get to you. So keep your space. Know the warning signs too when a moose does feel threatened. Some signs can be that, they stop whatever they're doing. They'll look at you for too long. Their ears might shoot back. They might start showing the whites of their eyes. The hair on their back stands up. And in some cases, they might even start urinating. And in a couple of weeks leading up to the rut, you might start to see bulls practice fighting with each other just to get used to their new set of antlers. And this is also when younger bulls will feel too intimidated and they do have quite a lot of difficulty mating. Cows usually don't like younger bulls. They don't really find them attractive. They don't really have like their genes fully formed and matured yet, if you know what I mean. And then this, of course, can very much annoy the bull as well. He's gonna want to keep trying to mate with the cow, but she's gonna keep getting annoyed, restless, making her longer, like annoyed cries. Well, some people say that this is part of the group of the different kinds of mating calls that they do. Sometimes it really is just that there's a cow in distress who's annoyed, who doesn't want to mate with somebody, but it will act as a mating call because a larger, more mature bull is going to want to come in hearing that she wants nothing to do with this younger bull. And on very hot days, like when I went last year, sometimes mating will take place more like at night than out and about during the day, so it might be really difficult to find them there as well. But you'll usually want to look for prints, of course. They're droppings that actually look a lot like deer droppings. They're just going to be bigger and a little bit more rounder. You're going to want to look for like path cuts through like wetlands, by bogs, so where you can see that there's like a stomped out trail to the woods, and even by like the roadways. That's a good spot. I would always opt for logging roads that are near wetlands, bogs, ponds when looking on Google Maps. Like I said before, even just doing moose tours in the fall, especially familiarizing yourself with the territory and then coming back and doing some scouting yourself. And I know it might be a little bit annoying or repetitive if you're like me and you've seen your fair share of moose, but just more cows and bulls. That when you see a cow moose during the rut, you're not really going to want to care because, oh my god, I mean, I've seen 30 of those already. But actually, that might be a really good sign, because usually where there are cows, there's probably going to be a bull not far off nearby who might have caught up on her scent. And another trick, so over the years, I've learned how to do cow calls especially. I used to be kind of okay with bull calls, but because my voice is a little bit higher pitched, it's easier for me to do the cow calls. But that's going to be a separate video that I'm going to end up doing later, teaching you guys how to do mating calls, both vocally and also make like actual physical tools that you can use if you can't learn how to do them vocally. But another trick, and I ask you, please don't abuse either of these. Like I've been saying, keep respecting wildlife. Let nature take its course. You don't want to confuse them too much. So the other one is what Maine hunting guides will usually do when they set up camp. And I've done this before at locations that I feel like would be ideal that you would be able to see them at. Is the evening before, I'll go out and I'll do a couple of cow calls just to get them from afar to hear and start making their way into the territory. And then I'll go to sleep. And then the next day when I wake up, first thing I do in the morning is I'll do a couple more calls, because chances are throughout the night, they most definitely showed up. And if you decide to go during the hunting season, please make sure that you know when hunting season is. Up north here in New England, it usually runs in 2 parts with a week dividing the 2. I made the mistake last year I checked to see if the hunt would be on or not, and it was off for moose, but I didn't check other ones, and I actually ended up pulling up right in the middle of black bear season. So, you know, you want to be careful. You want to wear like a high vis vest or a bright colored hat and just make your presence known a little bit more. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's all that dangerous, but just the overall noise and busyness in the woods from more human interaction is going to want to make moose go even deeper in, and it's just going to become more and more difficult to find them, especially like if you're in the North Woods somewhere very far away from population. There's just so much land to cover that even though Maine has anywhere from 50 to 70,000 moose, which has been declining, I don't even know how accurate that number is anymore, but I'll get into that at the winter section. It's just going to be so difficult to find them. And don't worry too much about wearing bright coloring, because moose are also colorblind. But yeah, I think that's all I have for fall. Let's get into winter. So unfortunately, the 2 biggest predators three biggest predators of moose is actually car collisions, which usually happen earliest in the year in April when they're out getting their salt licks. Then comes winter ticks and brainworm. So their biggest by far though is winter tick. Moose will have anywhere from 50 to 80,000 winter ticks living on them at once. If you're gonna Google this, do so at your own discretion because they are so horrifying and just horrific, disgusting, disturbing. Winter ticks, you don't really have to be afraid of them as like a person because they don't carry any diseases. The reason that they're just so destructive is because when they latch on to their host, they will just suck their blood until they become anemic, or they'll experience hair or fur loss, which will make them even more vulnerable during the colder, harsher winters. And because global warming has gotten so bad, there's nothing to control the lifespan and reproductive cycles of these winter ticks, so it's just getting out of hand. And then unfortunately, this is why a lot of young calves will now not be able to make it through their first year because they just become so malnourished and just deprived of their blood. And, you know, this affects cows too, because if they're not really in their most healthy condition, that's also why they won't be able to get pregnant or why they can't have twins, and they're just going to have less offspring. So it's all together a really bad situation. But yeah, so after the rut is over, this might be the only time of year you'll ever see bulls in groups. I haven't really heard about it or seen as much up north here in New England. I know like in Alaska and the Grand Tetons, some photographers love this time of year because you will get like these epic shots of bull moose in their bachelor groups of them just fighting for fun afterwards, like trying to let out whatever stress is still left over, you know, being still hormonally charged, and they just let it out and they get like the coolest shots ever. So if you're lucky, you know, you never know if you might stumble across something like that. And then once that's all over, moose will shed their antlers around January, and they'll just go back into like the deep woods just to be as sheltered as possible from the harsh elements of the season. They'll eat bark, twigs, so their diet becomes pretty limited, which is then why they go so crazy again early spring when they're looking for those salt licks by the roadsides that are filled with sodium-rich nutrients. Same with aquatic plants too. They have sodium in them as well. So, but yeah, those are just a couple of things. I mean, I've been pretty extensively studying them for the last couple of years as I got into moose photography as a hobby. I just love watching them. I think they're like the coolest, most majestic animals up north, at least in this area. They're just such a big symbol, and it's like seeing a dinosaur nowadays. I can't think of a bigger mammal on this side of the US than a moose. So just being able to observe them and enjoy them is such a blessing. So, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it taught you something new. I hope it inspired you to get out there and look for some yourself. And I really hope you guys are able to get some really amazing shots or just watch them. Be sure to comment down below your experience if you have had any, or if this has helped you get some cool shots this year or whatever year it is that you're watching this. But all right, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.